Unit 4, Resource Management Scenario Walkthrough. In this walkthrough, we will see resource management in practice with the PTB simulator. We will go over the different aspects previously discussed and demonstrate them with the PTB. Finally, you will get an exercise scenario so you can gain hands-on practice with what we've learned. Let's begin by opening the scenario elearning/walkthroughs/unit4.scn. This scenario is more complex than the ones we've seen before. It deals with the construction of an electrical transformation plant. The resource management view allows us to see the resource information as well as to assign and release resources. Click on the Resource Information button to see it. In this scenario, there are three resource types: workshop workers, LT or light tension workers, and HT or high tension workers. Currently, one unit of the type workshop workers is available. The number of available units in lead time is also 1, as we have not assigned or released resources. We will see how to assign and release resources later on. The cost of a single resource unit per period when it is deployed is $450. The cost when a unit is idle is $100. The releasing and assigning cost is $30. Each resource unit of this type has a show-up probability of 90%. That means that there is a 10% chance for each unit not to show up in a specific time period. The lead time for assigning and releasing resources is 1 time period. This signifies how many time periods it will take from the time we initiate and assign or release until the resource unit is actually assigned or released. The last two columns show the minimum and maximum number of units we are allowed to have. In this case, we can have between 1 and 5 units. The minimum 1 unit of the resource, which cannot be released, is a recurring or renewable type. This resource unit is assigned full-time to the project. Our first task is to create a plan for the project. Click on the Task Manufacture High Voltage Switchboards. We can see that currently the task is unplanned. The task has 3 modes of execution: subcontractor A, B, and C. The fixed cost for each mode typically represents costs of items that are needed in a fixed quantity. The consumption and cost of these items is not a function of the activity duration. Additionally, we can see the resources that are required as a function of the activity duration. For example, if we choose to execute the task in mode subcontractor A, the fixed cost will be $3,000 and the execution will require 5 units of type workshop workers for each time period the task is being executed. If we use more resources to execute a task, the duration will typically be shorter. For example, mode subcontractor A has a most likely duration of 3, compared to the most likely duration of 6 for subcontractor C. However, subcontractor A requires 5 workshop workers as opposed to 2 required by subcontractor C. Create a default plan for the project by clicking the Plan Default button. This creates a naive plan for the project. Choosing an early start time and selecting the cheapest execution mode for the tasks, which typically also has the longest duration. The plan created is not necessarily a good one or feasible in terms of resources. To see the resource usage for the plan created, we click the Resource Charts button and select the resource type of which we want to see the usage. Select Workshop Workers. In this view, we can see how many resource units of type workshop workers are required according to our plan in each time period. According to our plan, the first 6 periods require 4 resource units. The horizontal blue line shows us how many resource units of this type are available at each time period, which is 1 in our case. At the beginning of the project, the bars are colored in red. This is to indicate that our plan requires more resource units than we have available. If the plan does not require more resource units than the available amount, the bar for that time period is colored in green. We can see this in the last time periods. To understand why our plan requires 4 resource units of type workshop workers in the first time period, click on the bar of that time period. This opens a view that shows us which tasks are using this resource in the selected time period. We can see that there are 2 tasks: manufacture high voltage switchboards and manufacture low voltage switchboards. Each one uses 2 resource units. Switch to the Gantt chart. We see that in the first time period, 3 tasks will be executed: construction, manufacture high voltage switchboards, and manufacture low voltage switchboards. Click on each task to see the resource it requires. The construction task has only one mode, which is selected and requires 0 resources of type workshop worker. The task manufacture high voltage switchboards has mode subcontractor C selected. This mode requires 2 workshop workers. The task manufacture low voltage switchboards has mode subcontractor C selected. This mode also requires 2 workshop workers. This is the reason our plan requires 4 units of this type for the first time period. Switch back to the resource usage chart for resource workshop workers. If we try to run the simulation now, we will get a message that we cannot advance the time as there are not enough resources of type workshop workers. There are a few options to solve the resource availability problem. Delay tasks. Assign more resource units. Change execution modes of tasks. We'll try to solve the problem by changing the mode of execution. Go back to the Gantt chart and double-click on the task Manufacture High Voltage Switchboards. The mode that uses the least amount of workshop workers is already selected. If there was a mode that uses less of that resource, we could select it and thus reduce the resource usage. Try the task Manufacture Low Voltage Switchboards. Here as well, there is no mode available that uses less of this resource than the one already selected. We'll try to solve the problem by assigning more resources. To assign resources, click on the Resource Information button. Also, open the Resource Usage view for Workshop Workers. Select the Workshop Workers resource and enter 3 units in the Assign text box. Click on the Assign button. In the resource usage, we can see that in the lead time, which is 1 time period, we will have 4 resource units, which is exactly what our plan requires. However, we still have a problem for the current time period. The only choice is to delay the tasks using this resource in the current time period. Do this by dragging the tasks Manufacture High Voltage Switchboards and Manufacture Low Voltage Switchboards in the Gantt chart to start 1 period later. Now, in the resource usage chart, all the bars are green. In the first time period, 1 resource unit is available, but no units are used. This means that there will be an idle unit for that time period. Check the resource usage for other resource types. For the HT worker and LT worker, there are sufficient resource units at the beginning of the project. Change back to the resource usage chart for workshop workers and advance the simulation time. When running the simulation, there is a chance that a certain resource unit will not show up in a specific time period. If this happens and we don't have excess resource units, also known as a resource buffer, we have a problem. If there is a task that is about to start, we can try to solve the problem by delaying this task or changing its mode of execution. If this is not the case, and all the tasks are already in running status, we are forced to split a task. Splitting a task essentially causes it to pause. To do this, switch to the Gantt view and double-click on the task to split manufacture high-voltage switchboards. Enter the current time in the Split at text box and the next period at the Restart at text box. Then, click on Apply Split. The split is added to the splits data grid and the task is prolonged by the split time in the Gantt chart. Splitting a task typically has a cost associated with it. This is due to the cost of transferring resources from one task to another. In our case, the cost of split is 100. Switch back to the resource usage chart for workshop workers. In the next time period, the plan requires 2 resource units instead of 4. A way to mitigate the risk of resources not showing up is to create a resource buffer. This is done by having more resource units than actually required by the plan. There is a trade-off here. On the one hand, we might have to pay for the idle resources. On the other hand, there is less risk of not having enough resources, which might cause a delay in the tasks and in the entire project if these are critical tasks. According to the current plan, the project is scheduled to finish in time period 33. This means that the project will be late as our target time period is 31. If we continue executing the project in this manner, we will have to pay a penalty for each time period we are late. To see how much penalty we will have to pay, we click on the Scenario Info button. The penalty is 5,000 for each period we are late, meaning a penalty of 10,000 will have to be paid. We'll try to reduce the project duration by changing the mode of some tasks, also known as task crashing. Switch to the Gantt view and select the task Connection to Grid, which is on the critical path. The currently selected mode is Subcontractor B. Switch to Subcontractor A. Now, the most likely duration for the task changes from 3 time periods to 2 time periods. The trade-off is that the quicker mode is more expensive. It uses 1 more LT worker and has an additional fixed cost of 900. After changing the mode, the change is visible on the Gantt chart. Keep in mind that if task durations are stochastic, as in our case, the most likely time that appears in the Gantt chart is not necessarily the actual time it will take to execute the task. Now there is a gap at time period 29. Change the start time of task Turn On and Delivery from 30 to 29. This decreases the duration of the entire project. The estimated finished period of the project changed from time period 33 to time period 32. More changes can be made to further reduce the project duration. To conclude this unit, your assignment is to manage this project. Your job is to create a good plan for the project and follow through its execution. try to use duration compression to finish the project as early as possible. You have to think about the different trade-offs when selecting modes of execution and managing the resources. Remember to also pay attention to the project scope as you learned in the previous unit. To begin, open the file elearning/exercises/unit4.scn. Good luck!